Attention sports teams. Let us introduce you to the best fan engagement tool in the game, .vote. By getting a .vote web address for your team, you can allow fans to engage and interact with big-time decisions. In a single click, not only can fans make their opinions heard, but sports teams get a better understanding of their fans' interests. Keep your fans engaged. Simply visit GoDaddy.com today, type in the desired name of your web address, and let the voting begin.
It was a wild week one in the NFL. As wild as it gets, we break it down and try to separate the signal from the noise on this episode of Gordon Damer on Sports. Hey, welcome into another episode of Gordon Damer on Sports. Obviously, we got a ton to get into with the NFL week one. It did not disappoint. We got plenty to discuss. But before we do any of that, please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you are listening on. All right, so week one of the NFL, generally, I say this a lot, is as overblown as anything in sports. You think about the reaction, and really the overreaction that comes every single year. But I think that even sometimes one game of evidence is enough to kind of look at what is actually noteworthy and newsworthy, and not just blowing things out of proportion because we've only seen one game. So this episode, what I want to talk about is not just what I saw in week one, but I want to try to separate, yes, the signal from the noise. The signal being the meaningful information that you're interested in, and the noise, anything that's irrelevant or random or really kind of obscures the real point of the NFL season. So let's get into it. All right, let's start with Sunday Night Football because that was about as good a game as we might get all season long. Bills, Ravens, and that was one of the wildest finishes, one of the wildest games you'll see all year. Buffalo obviously pulls off the miracle, 41-40, and for Baltimore, I don't know what to say. I mean, it's just a collapse. It's not just a loss. It's not, hey, we'll get them next time. That was an absolute collapse, and the number that has been going around, I tweeted it out, for every Ravens fan, since 2021, Baltimore has now lost 8 games, which they had at least a 90% win probability. That's 8. That's 3 more than any other team in the league. On Sunday night, they had a 99.1% chance of winning. You don't just lose those kind of games, especially not in that environment. Yeah, it's a season-opening win for the Bills, but that is supposed to be a guaranteed lockdown win. And for 3/4 of that game, the Ravens outplayed the Bills. So Baltimore becomes the first team since 2000 to lose after leading by 15 points with possession with under 10 minutes to go in regulation. Teams had been 53-0 in those situations. And it seems like this is a regular thing for Baltimore. Remember last year, the season opening game against the Chiefs, they had that play with Isaiah Likely with the toe tap on the back line. They reviewed it, wasn't a catch, and they end up losing that. So one more stat for you on the Ravens. One of the 7 teams to lead at least 20 games by 9 to 16 points over the last 4 years, right? Teams in those situations, 159-13. 13 losses, and the Ravens have 6 of them. So when that happens that often, I think it stops being bad luck. At some point, it's not random anymore, and that coaching staff, it has to come back to coaching. Now, sure, the obvious point that everybody's talking about is the punt, and everyone watching in real time kind of knew that punt in that situation, giving the ball back to the Bills, was a mistake. With Josh Allen on the other side, your defense had already surrendered, 38 points at that point? You're putting your faith in your defense that looked absolutely gassed, and that decision did not make sense in real time. That's not second guessing. It made no sense at the time. It makes less sense when we saw how it played out. But honestly, the cracks kind of showed up earlier on. When Baltimore went up by 15, you would think that that's the time, hey, let's put our foot on the throat. Let's show that of these 2 teams, we're the better team. You've got the former MVP in Lamar Jackson. You've got Derrick Henry, who was averaging 9 yards a carry. Zay Flowers had a monster game, was shredding the secondary. Yet DeAndre Hopkins made that circus catch. The offense was humming. And yet after going up 15, Lamar Jackson, former MVP, could have been the MVP last year, got exactly 1 snap that wasn't a handoff, 1. So that's not just conservative. That is playing scared. That's coaching like, hey, we just don't want to lose the game. And maybe those previous losses kind of filtered in, whether subconsciously or consciously. And in this league, if you let a team hang around with their own MVP, with an elite quarterback on the other side, more times than not, that is going to get you. So let's take a step back and look at how good Baltimore's stars were in this game. It would be one thing if this were a close game. Lamar was 13 of 18, 203 yards, 2 touchdowns, no turnovers, 70 yards rushing. He was efficient. He was in control. He was a monster in that game. He was a menace. And when it wasn't him, Derrick Henry, 18 carries for 169 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was averaging, again, 9 yards a carry. He was getting a first down basically every time he touched the ball. And he looked like vintage Derrick Henry. So any questions about his age, that didn't show up, at least not in the season opening game. Zay Flowers, as I said, was unguardable. DeAndre Hopkins with one of the great catches, at least so far, of the season. So when you look at your core guys on offense, putting up those kind of numbers, and the fact through 3 quarters, you were controlling that game. You cannot lose that game in that situation. Now, these two teams are going to face off against each other almost certainly again before the end of the year. But for the Ravens and John Harbaugh, a lot of times when they're not beating their opponents, it's because they're beating themselves. You think back to the losses, the playoff losses, blown leads, missed opportunities, questionable decisions that cost them games. And the talent is not the question. The talent is there. The roster is built out completely. But time and time again, they've kind of been in this spot year in and year out, and they're always on the wrong side of these games. So when it's consistent as it's been, that's decision-making. And, going into the year, we talked about the Bills. If they don't win a Super Bowl, the coach is going to be in question. If you have any more of these kind of games, the Ravens coaching is going to be in question. And the thing is, the Ravens are a analytics-friendly organization, right? They've kind of been out in the forefront of that, and they've leaned into aggressive decisions, trusting the math and trusting the probabilities. Now, look, sometimes it blows up in their face, and if they went for it on that 4th down and didn't punt, and they would still be getting criticized because a lot of people, it's about the outcome, not the process. But I think that's where you got to stick to even when it's unpopular, you got to stick to what the right decision is. And on Sunday night, they abandoned him. And the smart decision there is always to do the opposite of what your opponent wants. And what do you think your opponent wanted you to do in that situation? Punt the ball back, right? Don't put it in Lamar Jackson's hand. Don't put it on Derrick Henry's hands, because the Bills had shown no ability to stop them in any situation. So the Ravens, with that decision to punt, it played out exactly how the Bills wanted. And look how it played out. 1:33 left, no timeouts. Bills ran 9 plays. 1:33 is an eternity, even with no timeouts. When you have a quarterback who's on the other side who is just as good as your quarterback. The fact that Buffalo was getting the ball back in that situation, they were uber confident, and it showed. So for Harbaugh, if he had gone for it and they didn't get it, yes, there would have been criticism. The same fans who are criticizing him for punting would be criticizing based on the result. But I think you have to put the ball in the hands of your best player, and their best player is Lamar Jackson. There's a reason why quarterbacks win the MVP every single year, and you have one of those guys. So instead of trusting a defense that had already kind of collapsed at that point and was just kind of hanging on for dear life, that was a mistake. And again, it's not just one game. It's a trend. It's a pattern with the Ravens. They keep putting themselves in these positions, but they let them slip away. They're not able to get over the hump of these games because they're the kings of right now. Oh, if only this, if only that. That used to be the Bills. It seems like the Ravens have kind of overtaken them in that aspect and losing games that were winnable. Now, look, again, it's one game. The sky is not falling. Baltimore is still one of the most talented rosters. Lamar is still an MVP candidate every single time he gets his hands on the ball. Derrick Henry looks fantastic. Zay Flowers, who there were some questions about where he's going to fit into this offense, at least through one game, looked like he fit in just fine. So on paper, this team should be competing against the Chiefs and the Bills for AFC supremacy. But a big part of that is not beating yourself. And they continually put themselves in these kind of situations. And it's hard to have a whole lot of faith that they are going to stop doing that when they continually do that throughout the course of these seasons. So For the Ravens, that is a devastating loss, a devastating way to start the season. It's not going to cost them that much, but it's still a painful one. For the Bills, it shows you this is a win or bust kind of situation. And when they were put in that situation at home, season opening loss, you're looking at it when they're down 15 points and you're thinking to yourself, boy, maybe the Ravens are just better than them. And then for them to be able to come back the way they did, right now it's all about a battle for who's going to be the team that really can finally beat the Chiefs. It's really a battle for second place at this point. And at least so far, the Bills have that second place because in the big moments, they trusted their quarterback and he was able to get it done. All right, now as good as the Sunday night game was, I think also a very telling game was the Packers in the Lions. That was one where it was a big question going into it, was the storylines of, okay, Green Bay has all the hype right now after the Micah Parsons trade, but are they ready now to take it to that next level, to that next step, and really kind of plant the flag and show they're the team to beat in the NFC North? Or is this going to be, despite all the changes, despite losing the two coordinators, losing some coaches, losing some players, that the Lions are still the kings of the division? And at least early on, we got our answer, and it was loud and clear because that was an absolute flat-out demolition by the Packers. Now, it's one game, but that is the kind of win where you can just look on the field and see how things are playing out because the Packers owned the Lions in that game. And you can spin this kind of two ways. Is it more about the Packers and their unbelievable defense and how they played a complete game, or especially in Micah Parsons' debut and what that means for them moving forward? Or is the bigger story about the Lions? And to me, the bigger story in that game is what happened on the other sideline with Detroit, because we saw from the Lions, that was not just one bad game. That was one where it kind of exposed the cracks of what makes them the Lions and what you thought you knew about them as a team. So this Lions team, the strength of their identity is that offensive line and beating you up front. That is their calling card, and everything else plays off of that. So you knew in years past when you lined up against Detroit, you were going to have to deal with those big guys up front, especially Penei Sewell, and then the running game with Montgomery and Gibbs, that's going to play off of it, and Jared Goff's going to feel comfortable and is going to be able to do play action. Never mind, when Ben Johnson had the freedom to kind of call up whatever he wanted because they had that solid foundation up front. But it got talked about some, but maybe not enough. They lose Frank Ragnow to retirement. He was one of the best centers in the league. Kevin Zeitler leaves in free agency, and now they're trotting out some guys, Graham Glasgow at center, Christian Mahogany, and another rookie, Ratledge, at guard. And that duo had started, I think, 2 games. They had 2 career starts before Sunday. So this is not just you swap some guys in and expect the machine to keep humming. So I do think that we've kind of downplayed how much change actually took place with the Lions. At least I did. Now, they have one of the best offensive line coaches in Hank Fraley. So they've been great at developing guys, and I'm sure over the course of the season that will develop. But you don't get to, when it's the strength of the team, it's a bigger thing than, just one part getting it up to speed. And that run game, that was completely neutralized. I mean, the offensive line was missing blocks left and right, and there were snaps where Jahmyr Gibbs was getting the ball and immediately getting hit by a defensive lineman in his face, had absolutely no place to run. So usually they are the guys leading the charge. Their offensive line on Sunday was a turnstile. So Montgomery and Gibbs combined for 44 yards on 20 carries. As an offense, they averaged 3.8 yards per play. They didn't find the end zone until garbage time. They finished with 246 yards. That's their second lowest over the last 3 years. And, of course, the kicker is it came against a Packers defense that lost its 2 best run defenders in the offseason. Green Bay wasn't supposed to dominate in the trenches, even with the addition of Micah Parsons, but they absolutely did. So when Detroit couldn't establish the run, everything else collapsed. Their whole offense looked conservative. It was a lot of checkdowns, a lot of safe calls, and it didn't feel like they were the same Lions, that's for sure. So you don't want to be putting the ball in Jared Goff's hands completely because things go awry when that happens. But at a certain point, I think you do have to take your shots. You got to put some pressure on them, but they were not able to do that because their offensive line was manhandled, and that does not happen very often. So I think that is a big focus moving forward for Detroit. For Green Bay, they unleashed their new toy in Micah Parsons, and he was a monster. And he was just a part-time player. 22 pass rush snaps, 3 pressures, 1 sack, and he beat Penei Sewell on the sack, who is one of the best young tackles in the league and is certainly the linchpin for that offensive line. And you just took a look at it. Every time Goff was pressured, he was wrecking plays, and it wasn't just Parsons, but I think that he was a big part of it. And that's why this defense, I think, suddenly feels different. Like, there were expectations for Green Bay this year, but last year their defense lived off turnovers. They lived off disguising coverage. They didn't have that pass rush monster, that game wrecker. And now, obviously, thanks to the Cowboys, they absolutely do. So the Packers didn't need a whole bunch of takeaways or some fluky plays to get to the quarterback. They lined up Parsons on a part-time basis again. And even when he was not in there, it felt like they got a ton of pressure, which makes me think this was more about the Lions. Like, look, credit to the Packers. They're for real. Their defense looks legit. And you would think that Parsons is only going to get more and more up to speed, right? Like, this is the rehearsal almost based on the fact that the trade came so late. So with them and their offense, and Jordan Love looked pretty good as well. So that team is dangerous. It's balanced. And they very well right now are the favorites in the NFC North through one game. But they look like a top team already before going into the season. So nothing that happened on Sunday changed that. But for Detroit, their whole blueprint, it seems like right now, has been turned upside down. You know, that offensive line, that was supposed to be their strength. And on Sunday, it was a clear weakness. They were just getting deluged. And Jared Goff, when you're forcing him to play from behind, he looked like the Jared Goff that got to Detroit and there was questions about him, right? All that momentum, all that goodwill from the last couple of years. I'm not saying it's gone. I still think that the Lions are too talented to disappear, but a lot of that goodwill, those questions were out there to a certain extent. And now about the coordinators leaving, John Morton is the offensive coordinator. It doesn't take long for the old line from Jerry Glanville, the NFL stands for not for long when you're not winning games. So suddenly the Lions look a little vulnerable. And I'm not saying that's going to be the case the entire season, but seasons can get away from teams. And if they are not careful in that division, it could certainly get away from them when you're talking about not just an area of their team, but the strength of their team. So they got to get back to work. And they said, hey, this is all fixable. It better be, because if it's not fixable, the Lions are going to be the biggest disappointment in the NFL this year. All right, now let's talk about one of the most entertaining games of the entire weekend, Jets and Steelers. Now, I did not have that one circled going in as one of the most exciting, especially from the offensive standpoint, games of the weekend. But boy, that thing had it all. Pittsburgh pulls out the win late thanks to a Chris Boswell 60-yard field goal, a career long for him with just about a minute to go. And that was an absolute dagger because that's a game that the Jets absolutely should have won. And then just when they had a little bit of less hope left, Jalen Ramsey seals it with that 4th down breakup of the Justin Fields pass to Garrett Wilson with about 25 seconds to go. And that's your ball game. So let's start with the Steelers because the Steelers trailed pretty much throughout the game. And then bang, right? They scored 2 touchdowns in less than a minute early on in the 4th quarter, and they completely flipped things. And you can say what you want, and we always do about Mike Tomlin and the offense and Arthur Smith. At the end of the day, Mike Tomlin's teams have that survival gene. I mean, they figure out a way to pull out these games. They really had no business winning that game on Sunday. So let's start with Rodgers because he got so much of the attention. 2 things jumped out to me about Rodgers. Number one, great performance, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. He cannot escape the pass rush anymore. He cannot escape pressure. And he struggled even moving around the pocket. So that might be part of, getting used to new linemen or whatnot. But I'll say this. I do not think he will make it through a season healthy. He took a couple of sacks. He got hit a bunch of times. And if those forget about even the sacks. If those hits continue to add up, that might be the best he will look all season long. And look, it was a sensational game. Good for him. He's the old veteran who's looking to go out on a win here in a good season. So 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. That's great for him. Now, the other part of it is saying that he loved beating the Jets and Jet fans going nuts over it. What did the Jets do to him? How did they do him wrong? Well, look, they moved on from him. And at some point, it's probably the way they handled it. He didn't like it. But with Rodgers and his ego, he was always going to feel disrespected. No matter how they did it. Moving on from him, you don't need me. It was, at the end of the day, it was the right decision. The Jets absolutely made the right call. Nobody is second-guessing that. So the Jets are better off not trying to, tying themselves to Rodgers any longer. They knew that. The new regime knew that. And he can say whatever he wants. Good for him. He got a win. The Jets lost the game. They should have won. And I get it. Jet fans are not going to want to hear about moral victories because they've had enough of that over the last, 15 years. But you can't deny, if you're a Jet fan and you don't come out of that game at least feeling positive about the future, especially when the news came down about Elijah Vera-Tucker, their offensive lineman, the guard, getting hurt again and out for the season, you think to yourself, oh my God, another season when we're going to be talking about the Jets' offensive line. But the major positive was their offensive line looks legit. Membo, the first-round draft pick, was dominating T.J. Watt, and that does not happen. And Justin Fields, sacked one time all game. That's not just that's historic for this team and for him. And because of that, Fields looked, let's be honest, that is the best that Justin Fields has probably ever looked. He was 16 of 22, 218 yards and a touchdown, 2 more touchdowns on the ground. I think he ran for 50 yards. He was in command. He was decisive. He was making big-time plays. He was making big-time throws. And you got to see the best of Justin Fields. So, and I think that a lot of those throws that he made on Sunday, he would not have been comfortable making in the past, especially because he wouldn't have had the time to make them in the past. And the Jets, in the first half, did not punt. That's the first time, I think, since 91 they had an entire half without punting. And you think about how bad the offense has been. Think about that. They did not punt in an entire half. Now, the question with the Jets is going to be, is Fields the long-term answer? And nobody knows. No, everybody will say they know. They don't know. But remember, when Jared Goff got to Detroit, nobody thought he was the long-term answer there either. They thought with all those draft picks they were getting, he'll just be a placeholder. So maybe Justin Fields is the placeholder, but maybe in the right environment, with the right scheme, with a team that believes in him, and an offensive line that can be the foundation of everything, there is more optimism based on what you saw on Sunday. And look, it's only one game, but I'll say this. The offensive line is more important than the quarterback with the Jets. Because if it's Fields is the long-term solution, or if it's not, you can find a quarterback someplace else. If this offensive line is not fixed at this point, well, then the rebuild is going to take a whole lot longer. A couple other points on the Jets. Xavier Gipson, love the guy, can't still be living on that punt return from 2 years ago. You got to bring something else to the table. And the penalties, which have been such a running theme with the Jets, 12 men on the field at one point. They had an unsportsmanlike conduct, unnecessary roughness. You thought that, that's the stuff that kills you in these games. And Jet fans know that better than anybody because they've died more times than Michael Myers. So for the Jets, it was a loss. It's not the way you wanted to win to start the season, especially when that game was there to be won, and you should have won that game, much like the Ravens should have won their game. But there's a lot more optimism than the typical week 1 performance for the Jets. If that offensive line is legit, they are going to win some games this year. And Justin Fields, if that's any indication of what he's going to look like, the Jets have a pretty bright future. All right, so I said the Jets have a very bright future. Let's flip it to the other side of things, and that would be the New York Giants. Giants, Commanders, week 1 of the season. I thought that this was pretty much a must-win game for the Giants, not to let things spiral, and now you see what that looks like. Now you start to see how quickly things can get away from you, especially when you put up the performance the Giants put up. They scored 6 points. 0 touchdowns, 6 points. They were 0 for 2 in the red zone. They were 4 of 16 on third down. I don't care who you're playing. You could be playing against a college team. You can't win doing that. And the tougher question is not what happened. We all saw what happened. The tougher question is, why does this keep happening to the Giants. They put together one decent drive in the first half. It was 16 plays for 76 yards, and they got a field goal out of it. That was the highlight. Russell Wilson got the ball out quickly on that drive. They actually protected him for a few snaps. But, 16 plays for a field goal? And it was pretty solvable after that because the formula completely fell apart. And look, it's the opposite of the Jets. With the Giants, it's also the offensive line. It's just a total disaster. It's a disaster. They couldn't run the ball. They couldn't open any lanes. The pass protection was terrible. Russell Wilson looked older than he is. You watch the Giants. If you're a football fan, it's the opposite. You watch that Sunday night game after watching the Giants, you would think it's a different sport. You would not think that it's the same sport. And I thought going into the season, boy, Giant fans are getting really optimistic for a team that's probably not going to be very good. They were the worst team last year. I know they didn't have the number one pick, but they were the worst team. And I never understood why people were getting so optimistic for an offense that basically kept everything the same, and the only change was they brought in Russell Wilson. They finished with 231 total yards. It's everybody's fault. It's on the quarterback, it's on the receivers, it's on the offensive line, but most importantly, it's on Dable and Shane. And those two things, Dable and Shane, should absolutely be tied together. Teams don't just go through this. Teams don't go year after year after year of not being able to play even a lick of offense. And the big change this offseason was Russell Wilson. That's it. And they drafted a kid who might play at some point. And I get it. The offensive line was hurt because Andrew Thomas was out. Look, if Andrew Thomas is the difference between the Giants being competent and what we saw on Sunday, well, then make Andrew Thomas the NFL MVP. He cannot possibly make that big a difference. He's a great tackle when he's healthy. He's never healthy. And the rest of the offensive line was terrible. This offense is terrible. And Brian Dable is the offensive guy. Now, I get it. He got the job based on the work he did with Josh Allen. He's been gone from Josh Allen for a while. Josh Allen looks like he's doing fine. The last 3 years, there's nothing worse than a Giants season opener. They've now been outscored 89-12 in their last 3 season openers. 89-12. That is unacceptable. And the optimism coming into this year, well, the offense is going to be different. The defense is going to be... The game didn't even matter about the defense. Don't even focus on the defense. It's about the offense. You cannot win games in the NFL with this offense. And that's directly on the head coach, and I think it's directly on the GM. Because the team is not good enough talent-wise, and the coach is certainly not getting the most out of the talent. So we said this when they drafted Jackson Dart. It's only going to be a matter of time. Like this idea that they're going to be able to sit him for a long period of time, that only works if you're winning games. If you're not able to win that game, which was there to be won, it ends up 21-6, but that game was there to be won. If the Giants could have made any plays, and I'm not just saying this because I took the Giants plus the 6.5. If they could have made any plays, they could have been in that game and they might have been able to pull it out. But they can't do anything offensively. It is like, it's worse than watching paint dry. It's embarrassing. It's boring. It's inept. And most importantly, it's consistent. It's not gotten any better. Nothing has changed. They can't block. They can't create anything. They got Malik Neighbors. They're just trying to force the ball to him at any chance. And the other team obviously knows that. So it's only going to be a little while before the Jackson Dart. They've already started the Jackson Dart calls. And it's only this regime has 2 ways to survive this. 2 ways. Number 1, win games. That's one. And if they're not winning enough games, they can go to the rookie and hopefully he looks good enough that you don't want to shake things up with Dable and Shane. But they've had the time, they've had the resources, they've had draft capital, and nothing. If anything, it looks worse. Does it look any better from the Joe Judge years? So, yeah, it's week 1, and it's a bad performance. This is how it starts. This is like watching the same movie. We know this. We've watched 3 years of this garbage offense. It's garbage. It's the worst in the sport. And for some reason, it never changes. From year to year to year, you've had 3 years. You had the first year. Let's cancel that out because you made the playoffs. You've had 3 years to do something to get this a little bit better. Now, look, maybe Washington's a whole lot better than I thought they were. Maybe. But, man, that Giant offense is brutal to watch. Brutal. And that is the takeaway from that game. And that's not noise. That is the signal. They stink. So as for Washington, it's kind of hard to know really what you can take from it. Jaden Daniels looks fantastic. Their offense looked pretty good. The Giant defense really wasn't able to get anything going. I mean, they did only score 21 points, so it was not a complete blowout. But, the defense, can I say that the Washington defense dominated from start to finish? Not really, because I think it's mostly on the Giants. I mean, the Giants' offense, if everybody does this to them, especially week one, at least the Giants scored some points this year. The Deebo Samuel connection looked pretty good. He accounted for 96 total yards, capped the game with that electric 19-yard touchdown run. That dude, when healthy, looks like he's made out of titanium. People just bounce off him, and he just keeps going. So if Deebo is back to being Deebo, he's going to be breaking tackles and playing with physical toughness and finishing in the end zone and all that type of stuff. So they've got some weapons, very high expectations for Washington this year. But it's kind of hard to know really what you can take away from the win when the overwhelming message of this game is that the Giants' offense is terrible. And it would be one thing, it's just not discounting Washington. It's everybody does it to the Giants. The Giants are the punchline of the NFC, if not the NFL. So it's great that Washington was able to take advantage of it. It was not that long ago. Washington was kind of in the position that the Giants were in, but they got the quarterback right. Another one where the Giants were winning games down the stretch of games, meaningless games, and lost out on the chance to draft at number 2. And maybe if they had Jaden Daniels, maybe things would have looked a little bit better. But Daniels is fantastic, helped the offense get some rhythm, and the new running back that they have there looks like he could obviously make some big plays. But, what stood out to me, I guess, with Washington is the offense looks dangerous, even if they had some mental errors, right? You can see the potential between Daniels and the mobility and Deebo's versatility now. They definitely added a major weapon if he is able to stay healthy long term. In terms of, their pass rush, again, it goes back to the Giants. Their pass rush was good, but the Giants just stink at playing football. They're not very good at playing football. So good for their defense, their offensive line. You saw some debuts, especially from their running back, Bill Crosby Merritt, showed some potential with that big run that he had. So at least in the fantasy community, a lot is expected out of him. They had some penalties, which were rough. I think they had 12 penalties in the game, and against, an actual NFL team, that might have mattered. But this game was such a snooze fest. And for Giant fans, it was a dose of reality. Maybe it's just delusion, right? Maybe it's just like wishing it's true. So, I mean, I don't know what else you can think if you're a Giant fan. To wait an entire offseason, right? You got the quarterback now. You're making changes. You're doing this. You're doing that. We're finally coming out. I've heard people say, well, Dable and Shane got the Giants on the right track. What track? They're not even on the track. They're nowhere. The Giants are terrible. And it's the same terrible. At least be different terrible, right? Like, at least improve the offense and then have a terrible defense. At least you score some points. At least it's a different terrible. Other teams have different terribles. The Giants have the same terrible. It's the same thing year in and year out. And this is supposed to be the offensive genius? Oh, my goodness. So the Giants are going to have a very long season. They will be having a new coach, and they should have a new GM as well. Do not leave him out of the conversation. When you get into the season and you have a bad team like the Giants are going to be, like the Dolphins, who we're going to talk about, all the attention is going to go to the coach because it's a coaching league, right? But it's bigger than that. If you're perennially bad, it's bigger than just the coach. It's about the talent. It's about the organization. And right now, the Giants are lost in the wilderness. All All right, speaking of just dreadful NFL organizations, let's dive into the Dolphins and Colts on Sunday. And I am not exaggerating when I say the Dolphins made the Colts look like the 85 Bears. I mean, the Dolphins, just when you thought going into a season, well, they're probably not going to be good. Hold my beer. They were completely inept, disorganized from start to finish. The only time they were shown on the red zone was when they were making another mistake. And they made Daniel Jones look like Peyton Manning. Scratch that. He might have been better than Peyton Manning. 22 of 29 for 272 yards and a touchdown, 159.9 passer rating. They scored on every possession, every single one. Now, again, some people are making this about Daniel Jones. It's not about Daniel Jones. This had everything to do with how unprepared the Dolphins were. And look, the first few weeks, with the preseason now getting cut down as much as it is, the first few weeks of the season sometimes are an extension of the preseason, but the Dolphins didn't even look like they were prepared for the preseason. They were that was about as bad a performance as you could have, just totally unorganized and unprepared. Now, look, there's already been a lot of talk about Mike McDaniel's going to get fired. Tua is not an NFL quarterback. And look, I'm not a fan of either. I've been on record. This is so much deeper than that. That is such a surface level view of what's wrong with the Dolphins organization. Mike McDaniel is a symptom of the problem. He's not the problem. The problem is ownership. Stephen Ross is a real world genius. He is an NFL moron. He is clueless on how to run an NFL team, how to pick people to run his NFL team. He's been running this thing for almost 2 decades. If you don't have any stretch of success during 2 decades, that's on you as the owner. Go back to the Brian Flores debacle. That was the tip of the iceberg. When they drafted Tua because he was supposed to be the franchise quarterback that the owner wanted, and rather than hire someone to actually run the football operation, Ross, no, we're going to keep the GM even though he's a disaster. And we're going to make it work with Tua. We're going to hand the keys of the organization over to this young man. And we're going to maximize his strengths no matter what. No changes from him. Never mind that no experienced coach with options would ever take that job. Never mind that Tua has limitations. Just we'll make it work. That's the Dolphins under Stephen Ross. And this is the same guy who midseason couldn't decide whether they were tanking, and then they started to win some games, and then they started He is inept as an NFL owner. And if they had just stuck with the tank, they would have gotten Joe Burrow, but they probably would have ruined him too. So there's no accountability in Miami. There's no structure in Miami. They are the definition of a non-serious organization. All the other teams must love the Dolphins because they're never going to win anything important. So look, is Mike McDaniel going to get fired? Yeah, of course. Of course. But it's not all on him. He was brought in to get the most out of Tua. And I think he's done that. The problem is with Tua. He didn't build the offensive line. He didn't build the roster. You can't win in Miami because they don't know what they're doing. So yes, is he going to get fired? Yes. Will the GM get fired? Maybe. But then they'll go out and hire another first-time head coach who probably has 0 other teams interested in him as a head coach. And then in 3 or 4 years, we'll do the same thing over and over again. So we'll pivot to the Colts because we got to be a little fair. I know people are saying that Daniel Jones, the Giants were the problem for Daniel Jones. Hold on. I know it's 1 week. I know we're all excited football is back. Daniel Jones has been a quarterback. This is his, I think, 7th or 8th year. He has never been healthy. He has never been consistent. And this performance came against the Dolphin team that looked like they just found out the game was taking place moments before the game, maybe even during the game. The Dolphins will be picking in the top 5 this year, and it's not just because of talent, it's because they have no direction. So I'll give Daniel Jones credit. He helped the Colts finally win a season opener. They had not done that since 2013. Back when Chuck Pagano was the coach and Andrew Luck was in his 2nd year. So that's been a long time. And really, the Colts have been a mess of an organization since that Andrew Luck retirement. So Jones did what he was supposed to do, didn't turn the ball over. I don't know if the Dolphins would have caught the ball even if he threw it to him. But he played smart. He managed the game the way he was, and the team is 1-0, and that's a win, especially for a coach who I don't think has a very long rope there either in striking. I don't think that they're going to be a very good team this year, but their offensive line looked the part. They weren't perfect, but they let Jones do his thing. They have enough weapons on offense, especially against a team that was sleepwalking through the game. Dolphin defense did not look like they were prepared to play at all, and it looked like the opening week of the preseason. You would understand that if that were the case. But all the reports out of Miami were that things were bad. And when the Dolphins, if the report, sometimes when teams, the reports are bad, it actually is a sign that people are overreacting. When the signs are bad with the Dolphins, they are actually bad. When the signs are good with the Dolphins, they're also bad. So for the Colts, I would say I need a little bit more evidence before I'm ready to crown them as a functional NFL team. They play the Broncos next week. Go execute anywhere close to the way that you executed against Miami. And then we will give some credit to the Indianapolis Colts. In a division, let's be honest, that's very winnable. So maybe the Colts are going to be the surprise team this year. But make no mistake, there are no surprises in Miami. It's not about Tua, not really. It's not about McDaniel. It's not even really about the GM, although he is a disaster and how he still has a job, I have no idea. It's about ownership. It's about a guy who has no idea how to run things, even though he's a real-life billionaire. And he'll fire the coach, I'm sure. And who knows? I think Joe Philbin was a Dolphin coach, got fired after week 4. We'll see if Mike McDaniel makes it to week 4. For the Colts, Daniel Jones, they got to enjoy a Sunday. Unfortunately for them, even though they play in a good division, they only get to play the Dolphins once. So that was their one win against them. They'll have to win some games against far better prepared and executing NFL teams from now on. But look, at least for 1 week, you get to feel good about where your organization is at and where they might be going. And who knows, maybe Daniel Jones is the long-term answer. But after 7 seasons of inconsistency, I have to see a little bit more before I'm ready to crown them the kings of the AFC South.
Remember college? Well, now, college is over, and here comes your student loan debt. Is your private student loan debt keeping you up at night? You really need to talk to YRefi. YRefi refinances distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They can save you thousands of dollars and get you a custom payment that you can afford. And they don't care what your credit score is. Don't let private student loan debt ruin your life. Call YRefi today.
All right, that's going to do it for another edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. If you've listened this long or watched this long, please hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you are watching or listening on. It really does help us out, and we will be back later this week with another episode of Gordon Damer on Sports.